Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the Alpha Girl Confidence Podcast. I'm your host, Shay Haddo, and this is episode 211. So in this episode, I'm going to break down my book, She the Confident, in a little bit, and I want to share 3 big things that I would change about the book. So the reason that I wanted to do this podcast episode is because I wrote my book back in 2019, and I am a lot different than I was back in 2019. So as I was going through the book and wanted to record this episode, I thought there was going to be quite a few things that I wanted to change. But to my surprise, and I was very happy to experience this, that there's only a couple things that I wanted to change because the book really is great, so great for so many female athletes and has made a huge transformation. And a lot of girls have seen big results from the book. So the book is great. If you haven't read it yet, don't think that I'm going to pick it all apart. There's only a couple things that I want to get real clear about. And from the time of recording this episode, we've sold almost 10,000 copies of the book. And that trend is continuing to go up and up and up every single month. So if anyone of you has already read the book, I would advise you to kind of get out your book and kind of follow along with this episode. And if you're listening to this episode and then you go get the book, take note of these couple of small, slight tweaks and changes that I would change about the book. So that's that. Let's get into these 3 things. So the first thing, if you're kind of following along, is on page 32. Page 30. The first thing is on page 30. So it's about when I was talking about your strengths and your weaknesses. So in the book, I talk mostly about working on your weaknesses as opposed to your strengths. Because if your weaknesses continue to stay weak, you're not going to be very confident. So that's kind of like the premise of, in a very, very simple terms, of what I'm talking about in the book. But what I've learned through experience, through looking at my own story, and also through learning from other people, is that yes, it's important to work on your weaknesses, but I think it's more important to make your strengths even better. So I have an old college teammate who I still do stuff with and talk with, named Lauren Hutchinson. And on one of my coaching calls that she came on as a guest on, she said something that really stuck with me. And she said that you should spend 70% of your time focusing on your strengths and 30% on your weaknesses. And I think that's a great way to look at it, because if you're only focusing on your weaknesses, you're going to be just like average at everything, right? Like you're not going to have one real strength that makes you stand out. But if you focus 70% of your time on your strengths and 30 on your weaknesses, you're going to be the best at like that 1 or 2 things that you consider your strengths. So for example, like a real life example here in my story is I was before I got hurt, I was fast, but like most of my career, I was not fast. I wasn't the strongest. I wasn't the most technical. My shot wasn't the best. My left foot wasn't the best, all those things. But I did have a couple really big strengths. And if it wasn't for me focusing on those strengths, then I would not have gotten recruited. And that strength was heading the ball. Like I was always the best player on the field at winning air balls, winning 50-50 balls, because I could get up and I wasn't afraid to use my head. And if you go ask my college coaches why they recruited me, they didn't recruit me because I was average at shooting or average at footwork or whatever. They recruited me because I was the best at winning the ball out of the air. And so that was the thing that really set me apart and helped me to get recruited. So that should be a real life example of like, oh my gosh, like I'm really good at shooting, so I'm going to hone on this. Or I'm really good at winning tackles, I'm going to hone in on this. Or I'm really good at posting up players or batting or fielding or whatever it is for your sport. I would encourage you to identify those 1 or 2 strengths, those things that you are really good at, and try to spend most of your time honing in on those, focusing on those so that you are the best at that one thing. Right. And same thing, if you look at a lot of like pro athletes, like they have their strengths too. So I'm not saying that we're never going to focus on your weaknesses. You're still going to spend some time on your weaknesses so that you can become well-rounded, but spend more time on your strengths so that you can, number one, stand out and like really have that thing be your superpower. But also that's going to build your confidence too, like knowing that, hey, I'm the best on the field at this one thing, and I don't need to be the best at everything. I just want to be the best at this one thing. So that's the first thing, is a strength and weaknesses. Again, that's around page 30. Okay, the second thing is around controlling, big emphasis on the word controlling your inner voice. So this is on page 32. So in this chapter, there are a lot of good things in that chapter, but one thing that doesn't sit well with me now is that I use the word control and talk about the word control too much. So instead of controlling your inner voice, here's where I'm going, what I would change. Instead of controlling your inner voice, think more about noticing that inner voice and questioning that inner voice, because it's really hard to control what's going on in your head, right? If I were to tell you to think of a blue elephant, what are you going to think about? A blue elephant. What if I tell you not to think of a blue elephant? What are you going to think of? A blue elephant, right? So you didn't necessarily have control over what you're thinking. When you're overthinking and when you're in this anxiety and stuff, it's like, it's really hard to get out of that. So instead of fighting it and trying to control it and manipulate it, notice it, let it come in, and then question it. And this is a big thing that I'll probably have a whole other episode around, is the power of believing or not believing in your thoughts. So your inner voice, right? Thoughts, same thing. Inner voice, thoughts, we can use them as the same word. So your thoughts, if you believe your inner voice, your thoughts to be true, then those are going to have a lot of power over you. If you believe that your inner voice and your thoughts are not true, right, then it's not going to have power over you. So if you have the thought of I'm not good enough and you believe that to be true, that's really going to have a hold on you and it's going to affect you and you probably won't feel good enough, right? Whereas if you have the thought I'm not good enough, but you don't believe it's true, then that thought, that inner voice is just going to kind of move on its way and it's not going to have any power over you. So it's so important, instead of controlling your inner voice, notice it's there, be aware of it, and then question the validity of those thoughts. A simple question you can ask yourself when you notice those thoughts come in is this true? Yes or no? Really simple, right? So notice, allow, and then question instead of trying to control. All right. And then the last one, number 3, is about the goal setting, about SMART goals. So it's on page 67. So this is a great way to be like the SMART goal strategy. It's a great way to be introduced to goal setting, especially if you've never set goals and stuff before. It's a great way to get specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely, like all that's what the SMART stands for in the book. But so there's nothing wrong with doing it that way if those kind of goals help you. But what I would change is not that I necessarily would take that away, but what I would change or add to that is to make sure that your goal and the outcome isn't like the thing that you're really, really focused on. Instead, what you're really focused on is the habits that will get you to your goal. So it's focusing more on the process of the goal, like what do I need to do today? What are the habits I need to develop? Not the outcome of the goal. Because if we're just attached to the outcome, number 1, you're never going to get there. Number 2, you're probably not going to learn anything from it. You're not going to enjoy it. Like there's so many things that will come, not on the necessarily positive side if you just focus on the outcome. So if you're wanting to set goals and you need some structure, using SMART goals can be a great way to add structure to your goal setting to make sure that it makes sense and that you can actually kind of measure that. But if you like more freedom with goal setting, then you don't have to use that. Like I would encourage you not to use that if you want more freedom with your goal setting, and instead focus on what are the habits that I need to develop and adopt in order to get this outcome that I want, right? What are the habits and habits that I need to adopt and implement in order to get the outcome that I want? So focus more on the process, not so much the outcome. So I hope this episode is helpful. Again, I know if you're probably listening to this episode, then most likely you have read the book. That's maybe how you got introduced to the podcast, is through the book. So I would encourage you to kind of go through, maybe make some notes in your book around those couple of things if it really resonated with you. And then if you haven't read the book, I would encourage you, if you do go and get the book, to kind of make some notes when you get the book about these couple of things. But again, it was nice to see when I went through the book, because it's been a while since I've gone through my own book, that there was still a lot of great stuff in the book that I wouldn't change. I thought I was going to have a list of like 10 things. So it's nice to only have a couple big things in here. And maybe, just maybe, I will have a second book coming out within the next year or so. I would absolutely love to, because I know this book has made such a huge impact. So again, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you haven't if you haven't read the book, you can find it on Amazon. Just type in She the Confident. You can even Google it and it should come up. And I would love to have you read it if you haven't already. So I hope you got a lot out of this episode, and I will catch you next week.